Hey, what is up guys? Today I want to make a quick video about my opinion on the most famous card in the game, Max C, and whether I think it should be banned or it is fine at 3 as is. So if you do not know that, in the TCG, which is the European, Americas, etc. region, Max C is banned, and over in the OCG it is at 3. We are basically always a bit more influenced by the OCG, that's why we also have it at 3. What do I think about this? I think there is an argument made for Max C in our format, and I will get to that in a moment. Though I think overall, if I could choose today if I wanted to ban this card or keep it at 3, I would say ban this card and get it out of the game. Why is that? The first reason is, and I have put this up here on the side so you can see what I mean, is because I think it limits deck building quite a lot. Of course, when you build a deck, the first thing you basically need to include is the engine for the deck. So just or as an example, if you play the BANN MAXX deck, you would then put cards in like these, circular, you need the equation, maybe the superfactorial, and these would be considered the engine. The engine is are the specific cards for the archetype that you basically need to successfully run the deck, and that basically give the deck its name. So by playing the BANN MAXX cards, it is a BANN MAXX deck, or by playing the Tearlament cards, it is a Tearlament deck. And of course there are decks that are more like engine heavy, and then there are decks like BANN MAXX, for example, that are less engine heavy, meaning that you can put in a lot of hand traps or other stuff, which makes the deck more flexible, which can be cool because then you can use deck building to maybe influence your deck against the meta. You can see, okay, maybe Tearlament is right now a really good deck, then maybe you play the Infinite Impermanence or play some other card, but do not play the Ash Blossom because it's not that important against Tearlament. So that's the cool thing about deck building, especially if there is a small engine, because then there's a lot of room to make your own choices and to be creative. The thing is that when Max C is in the game, you basically see this I put in here. What you basically need is triple Max C, triple Ash, 2 Caught By, and 1 Crosshair Designator, and you can see that this is basically played in nearly every deck. Minus the Crosshair, I would say. I would say the Crosshair is not that important, but the other cards for sure. And you also can see this if we quickly switch over here to Master Duel Meta, which is a cool site with a lot of infos. If you guys do not know it already, you can see here the most popular cards on the site. So the people that are putting deck lists up on this site, and this is the best resource we have when it comes to Master Duel. And you can see that the most used card in any deck is Max C. The second most used card is Caught By the Grave. Then we have actually Zeus, because we have a lot of decks in the current meta that are XYZ dependent, or that use XYZ monsters. Of course, in a less XYZ meta, you would see the Zeus a bit more down. And then on the basically third place or fourth place in this moment is Ash Blossom. Those are the cards I just showed you. Those are the cards I just talked about. Every deck basically runs it. That's why they are on top there. And you can see the Crosshair Designator in the second row there. Back to Master Duel. What I wanted to show you is you need to run this core, and this basically hinders your deck building. Also, every deck runs this, so it's more boring because every deck plays these cards. Why is that? So Ash Blossom is always basically the best hand trap you can play because Max C is in the game, because Ash Blossom can negate the Max C. Max C is the strongest card in the game because Max C basically says you have to pass your turn over to me if you cannot stop it. That's basically what's written on the card. So obviously, if you play against a trap deck that does not really special summon monsters and only use traps or something like Labyrinth, then it doesn't matter. But I would say 95% of the decks that are out there, and 95% of the decks at any given time in the meta, will use a lot of special summons to fulfill their strategy, especially if there are combo decks, and there are always a lot of combo decks out there. So if your opponent if your opponent gets like to play on the first turn, he gets coin flip, goes first, and you play Max C, then this basically means if he cannot negate it, which Caught By, with cross out, or with the Ash, this means that you or your opponent basically has to pass over his turn to you then, because otherwise he will give you such a big advantage that you can just win. The only situation in which it can make sense to play through the Max C, or into the Max C as it's called, take the Max C challenge, is when it is the turn that you can attack. If you have a first turn you cannot attack your opponent, you can basically not kill your opponent, it nearly ever makes sense to play into Maxx C. I know that a lot of people are doing this, and I think if you're playing a heavy combo deck that can build up an impressive and really strong end board, you maybe can do it. But let's be real here, in the most amount of times, if you get Maxx C'd, you are better off passing your turn over to your opponent, maybe setting up 1 or 2 good interruptions that maybe give your opponents 1 or 2 cards. So if you basically can get a Baron on the field for giving your opponent 2 cards, you could consider that to be an okay trade. If you can get a Baron up with only 1 card, that's for sure a good trade, because Baron can basically negate everything. But other than that, your opponent plays a Maxx C on basically your first turn, and you have to pass your turn over, and that's annoying. But I would not say that this is the most annoying part of the game, of the Maxx C. That's another thing that I will come to in a moment. So then we have Ash. As I already said, this is basically a must-have because this negates Maxx C. Then we have Called By. Called By is also a must-have because this negates the Ash and also negates the Maxx C. So this stops Maxx C, but this can also stop the Ash. So if you play your Maxx C, your opponent Ash blossoms you, then you can Called By the Ash, or maybe you can Called By the Maxx C by itself. So obviously this card makes total sense because it works against these 2 other cards. And then we have a Crossout Designator. Crossout Designator can cross out all of these 3, but could also cross out the counters. So if you play a Maxx C, your opponent Ash blossoms that, then you can cross out the Ash, or you can cross out the Called By. So all these cards are one package that work together. And for example, in the TCG, Called By the Grave and Crossout Designator, these are more specific cards. You do not see them in every deck. It's more the case that you rarely see them, and they are more side deck cards, which get sometimes put in the side deck. You, for example, you see the Crossout Designator and the Branded Deathweaver deck because you need to cross out an Ash, so your Branded Fusion can get through. Those are places where you can see those cards. Other than that, these are more niche cards and not the dominant cards that they are here in the game. Same goes for Ash Blossom. For sure you see Ash Blossom a lot more in the TCG than you see those 2 cards, because Ash Blossom in general is a good hand trap. But don't understand this wrong, because Ash Blossom is not played in every deck in the TCG as it's over here in Master Duel because of Maxx C being a card. So you basically have to always put these 9 cards in. I think that's really bad for deck building and for creativity. Then we have the second point I made, or I will make now, that the really problematic thing is, like, I don't really think that's a super problematic. If you go first, you win the coin flip, and then you basically have to pass your turn over because you got Maxx C'd. I think that's okay. It always feels bad, but there basically needs to be some mechanism to make the coin flip a bit more fair. And Maxx C does that to a point, I would say. Because obviously, if your opponent starts and you have an advantage if you can at least do something on your turn, even if you cannot do your combos because you got Maxx C'd, you can at least put some traps down or some quick spells, or maybe put a monster in defense position, or maybe evil special summon 1 monster, as I said, a Baron, so you have something on the board. And then it's not like your opponent goes first, but you were able to do something on your turn, so it's a bit more even. So in this case, I'm not totally against it. The case in which Maxx C feels really bad, and I think every one of you was in this situation already, if you build up, or if your opponent builds up a really strong board, a combo deck, for example, BANN MAXX or let's say an Emancipator, they build up a really strong board, and you have quite a good hand. You are thinking, okay, with this hand I might be able to break through it if I play it correctly. So you are like, okay, cool, this will be a challenge. I will have to prove that I know how to combo right, how to use the cards, use the effects, and then on your draw phase, for example, you get Maxx C'd, and then the game is over. Because whatever you do, if you like break the board, it does not really matter, because breaking the board basically means you have to invest a lot of resources, special summon a lot mostly, and then yeah, basically your opponent draws 100 cards and the game is over. So this is a situation where the game is really over, and I would say like 95% of the times. If your opponent builds a big board and then you got Maxx C'd on your turn, the game is over, and that feels so bad. This is the worst thing that can ever happen, and this is one of the big reasons I think Maxx C should go. The other reason being that this strictly limits deck building and makes these cards always good in every meta and every scenario. This is also a reason why Branded Despair can never be that good here in Master Duel, and it was never that uber great in OCG, because there's always Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom kills the deck. So every deck that is weak against Ash Blossom is always worse here in Master Duel than it is, for example, over in the TCG. Yeah, I would say ban this card. You can see it in the TCG as well. I also play in the TCG, I play in tournaments, I play on Dueling Nexus. It's far more relaxing if Maxx C isn't there. Of course, there will be times when your opponent just goes first, builds a big board, and you cannot break the board and lose the game. But yeah, I think it's worth trading that for having these deck building limitations, and also the really bad situation that if your opponent Maxx C's you when he built up a board, the game is over. It's so annoying. It's always these, a lot of content creators call it that, the Maxx C minigame. Maxx C minigame being is, you play your Maxx C and you are like, okay, do you have an Ash? Do you have a card buy? Do you have a crossout? No? Okay, cool, I get my Maxx C through. And then the game state changes completely. And then you get to play your real game with your real decks. But before that happens, this core cards here will first have to be matched against each other, because they are basically in every deck. You play your Maxx C, does your opponent has the called by from the core cards, from the 9 core cards here. So it's basically the 9 cards against your opponent's 9 cards, and then you can play the real game after that. So that's a bit annoying. One thing I will say in the end of this video that is positive for us players when it comes to Maxx C being in Master Duel is that, of course, all of these are ultra rare, as you can see, but every deck, basically every deck that you can build, needs these 9 cards. So over in the TCG, for example, you would play than other hand traps, or would play a bigger engine, and that means that you would need more cards of higher rarity. Of course, if in every meta this here would change, then you not only need the Ash Blossom, but you need Ghost Ogre, you need Drone Lockbird, you need the other one beside Ghost Ogre, the Haunted Bell, Haunted Mansion. Then you need way more cards, and a lot of them are also ultra rare, or you need more engine cards, and a lot of the engine cards are also ultra rare, as we just could see with the tier element cards, a lot of them being ultra rare. So these would be substituted by other cards that you then would need to craft, and if you just craft these 9 cards here, like I already said, Crossout Designator is not that important, but also belongs to this package, but there are a lot of deck lists that do not run the Crossout Designator, but these 8 are basically mandatory in every deck. Then you have the advantage that there are always 9 cards that you already have. You basically have 9 cards for every deck that will ever come in Master Duel, so that's good from a resource point of viewing the issue. But to come to a conclusion, I would say banning Maxx C would be better for the game, would be more fun and more interactive, would enable better deck building and more creativity. Of course, there will be some downsides, as I already mentioned, but my opinion is ban this card, give me my 90 crafting points back, and I will be super happy. And then these cards will also be basically goners and only be there if they are important for the metagame. You could then also unban these. For example, this in TCG is at 3, while here in Master Duel it's at 1, because it's strong here, because these other cards exist. That's the only reason. And yeah, so that it is for me. Please let me know in the comments what you think. Please write in the comments, do you like Maxx C? Do you hate Maxx C? Do you want Maxx C banned? Why shouldn't it be banned? Why should it be banned? Please go in the comments and write your thinking, your opinion now. Awesome that you were here with me. I hope we see each other in the next video, and until then, bye.